The silence in the house after Mark left was a physical thing. It had a weight, a texture, a presence that filled the rooms from floor to ceiling, pressing in on me from all sides. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleeping household or the comfortable hush of a lazy Sunday morning. This was a void, an acoustic vacuum where the echoes of slammed doors and shattered promises still lingered, too faint to hear, but too heavy to ignore. I stood in the center of the living room, the very room where I had served him the divorce papers that felt, now, like ancient history, and I simply existed. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't pour a drink, though the crystal decanters on the sidebar gleamed in the fading afternoon light, tempting me with amber oblivion. I just stood there, letting the silence soak into my skin, into my bones, until I became a part of it. This was the first moment of my new life, and it began not with a fanfare, but with this profound, deafening nothing. It's funny the things you notice when your world stops, the way a dust mote dances in a sliver of sunlight, a tiny, carefree ballet in the midst of your cataclysm. The low, persistent hum of the refrigerator, a sound I normally never heard, now a monotonous drone underscoring the end of my marriage. The faint, ghostly imprint on the rug where Mark's favorite armchair used to sit, before the movers came and took it away, along with half the life we'd built. I saw every smudge on the window panes, every scuff on the floorboards. The house was a museum of a closed exhibition, and I was the sole curator, left to catalog the artifacts of a civilization that had collapsed. My name is Elena. For 10 years, I was Elena, Mark's wife. For 5 of those years, I was also Elena, Sarah's best friend. Now I was just Elena, stripped bare. The titles had been revoked, the affiliation severed. Who was I without those definitions? I walked slowly through the rooms, my fingers trailing over surfaces. The cold marble of the kitchen countertops where we'd shared hurried breakfasts and late-night talks. The soft fabric of the sofa where we'd curled up to watch movies, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. Every memory, once a treasured jewel, now felt like a shard of glass, sharp and dangerous to the touch. I had won. I had exposed them, outmaneuvered them, and taken back what was mine. So why did this victory feel so hollow? Why did this empty house feel less like a fortress I had secured, and more like a prison I had built for myself? The days that followed were a study in surrealism. I moved through them like a sleepwalker, performing the mundane rituals of life on autopilot. I showered. I ate, though the food had no taste. I answered emails for the boutique, my fingers typing out competent, professional responses while my mind was 1,000 miles away, trapped in that moment in the restaurant, watching her laugh, watching his hand cover hers. The image was seared onto the back of my eyelids, a permanent film reel playing in the dark. Sleep was a foreign country. I would lie in the middle of our king-sized bed, my bed now, and stare at the ceiling, the space beside me a vast, cold continent. I could still smell his cologne on the other pillow, a faint, cruel ghost that I refused to banish. It was my penance, my reminder. I would feel the phantom weight of him, the dip in the mattress that was no longer there, and the ache in my heart would sharpen into something so acute, so physical I would gasp. The phone would ring, and my heart would lurch, a stupid, hopeful little animal thinking it might be him, that it had all been a terrible dream. It was never him. It was my mother, her voice tight with worried disapproval. "Darling, are you sure you've thought this through? A separation, maybe. But divorce, it's so final." It was mutual friends, their tones carefully neutral, fishing for information, trying to decide which side to take. I gave them nothing. I was polite, vague, a masterclass in deflection. I could feel the gossip spreading through our social circle like a stain, a Rorschach test of speculation. Did you hear? Mark left Elena. Or the more salacious Elena kicked Mark out. Something about his business partner, Sarah. I became a pariah, a subject of whispered conversations at cocktail parties I would no longer be invited to. The green lawns and genuine smiles of our neighborhood now felt like a stage set, and the other actors were watching me, waiting for me to break character. I didn't break. I hardened. The silence, the loneliness, the pitying looks, they were all fuel for the cold fire that had kept me going for months. That fire had been the plan, the strategy, the meticulous step-by-step blueprint of my revenge. Now that the revenge was complete, the fire needed a new purpose. It found one in the boutique, Elena's Haven. The name suddenly felt possessive, childish, a relic of a time when I needed to stamp my identity on things. It was time for a change. I spent a long weekend at the shop, surrounded by fabric swatches, paint samples, and architectural drawings. I ripped down the old soft pink walls and had them repainted a sharp, modern gray. I replaced the frilly, feminine displays with clean, minimalist shelving. I cleared out inventory that represented the old Elena's taste, the safe, pleasing, slightly boring pieces, and went on a buying trip, seeking out bold, independent designers, pieces with edge and personality. It was exhausting, physically demanding work. My muscles ached, my hands were chapped and dirty, but for the first time in months, my mind was quiet. The hammering, the drilling, the smell of fresh paint. It was a cacophony that drowned out the silence in my head. I was up on a ladder, wrestling with a stubborn light fixture, when I saw her. Sarah, or rather a ghost of her. She was standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadow of an awning, just watching the shop. She looked diminished, small. She wore a simple trench coat, her shoulders hunched against a wind I couldn't feel. Her face was pale and drawn, devoid of the makeup that had always been her armor. There was no crimson kiss, just pale, chapped lips. We locked eyes for a moment that stretched into an eternity. There was no anger in her gaze, no hatred, just a hollow, bottomless exhaustion. I saw the question in her eyes, the same one that haunted me. Was it worth it? I didn't look away. I held her gaze, my face a neutral mask, until finally she flinched. She turned and walked away, her figure swallowed by the city crowd, disappearing as completely as her career had. I went back to my light fixture, my hands trembling slightly. Seeing her should have felt like a victory. It just felt sad. A week later, the paperwork arrived. The divorce was final. The thick legal envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if it contained not just paper, but the condensed weight of a decade. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the kitchen counter, a silent monument, and went about my day. It wasn't until that evening, with a glass of wine in my hand, that I slid my finger under the flap and broke the seal. The words were dense, legalese, a cold, clinical dissection of a relationship. The marriage of the parties is hereby dissolved. The petitioner, Elena M. Vance, shall be awarded sole ownership of the business entity known as Elena's Haven, hereafter to be referred to as Haven. I had won. Officially, legally, completely. I thought I would feel something more. Jubilation. Vindication. But the silence in the house just seemed deeper, the emptiness more absolute. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the contact I hadn't dialed in months. Mark. What would I say? It's over. He already knew. I hope you're happy. I didn't. The truth was, I had nothing to say to him. The man I had loved was a fiction, a character played by a stranger. The stranger was now gone. I put the phone down. The chapter was closed. The book was finished. The next morning, I launched the rebrand. Haven was born. The website went live, sleek and black and elegant. The social media feeds exploded with the new aesthetic. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My existing clients were intrigued. New customers, a younger, hipper crowd, flocked to the store. The local paper did a feature on the bold new direction for a local boutique. For the first time, the business felt truly, authentically mine. It was no longer a hobby, a side project. It was an extension of myself, my taste, my resilience. The profits, now entirely under my control, were reinvested. I started scouting locations for a second store. My days were a whirlwind of meetings with designers, contractors, and my small, fiercely loyal staff. The silence was being filled, not with noise, but with purpose. I put the house on the market. It sold in a week for over the asking price. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way. They were full of bright-eyed plans for the nursery, for family dinners in the formal dining room we almost never used. As I signed the final papers, handing over the keys to my past, I felt a lightness I hadn't known was possible. It was done. I was free. My new apartment was on the top floor of a modern building downtown. It was all sharp angles, polished concrete, and walls of glass that looked out over the sparkling city skyline. There were no ghosts here. No memories lurking in the corners. Everything in it was chosen by me, for me. The art was bold and abstract. The furniture was low-slung and minimalist. It was a sanctuary, a true haven. I would stand at those windows for hours, watching the lights of the city twinkle on, each one a story, a life. My life was one of them now, separate, distinct, my own. I started dating again, tentatively, awkwardly, a series of coffees, drinks, dinners with men who were perfectly nice, perfectly pleasant. Lawyers, accountants, a musician. They were all perfectly fine. But with every date, I found myself comparing them not to Mark, but to the woman I had become. Were they sharp enough? Were they strong enough? Could they handle the complicated, scarred, powerful person I was now? Most of them, I realized, could not. They wanted the woman I used to be, the softer, more pliable Elena, the one who would have prioritized their career, their dreams. I was no longer that woman. I had built my own dreams, and I was no longer willing to compromise them. I threw myself into my work with a single-minded intensity I never knew I possessed. Haven became more than a store. It became a brand. I began mentoring young female designers, offering them a platform in my shop, advising them on their business plans. I found a deep, profound satisfaction in using my hard-won knowledge to help other women avoid the pitfalls I had fallen into. Ms. Davids, my severe, brilliant forensic accountant, became an unlikely friend and business consultant. She was the one who helped me structure the business for expansion. Her sharp mind, seeing opportunities and risks mine, was still learning to perceive. One rainy Tuesday, almost a year to the day after the divorce was finalized, I was working late at the flagship store, going over inventory reports. The city was slick and shining outside the windows, the sound of tires on wet pavement a soothing rhythm. The bell on the door chimed. I looked up, expecting a last-minute customer. It was Mark. He stood there, dripping onto the pristine floor, his umbrella clutched in a nervous hand. He looked older. The lines on his face were deeper. His hair was thinner. He'd lost weight. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a hesitant stoop. He was just a man. A tired, middle-aged man. Elena, he said, his voice rough. My heart didn't lurch. It didn't race. It beat its same steady rhythm. Mark, I replied, my tone neutral, the way I would address a supplier. Can I help you? He flinched at my tone, at the polite distance in it. I was in the neighborhood. I saw the light on. The place looks amazing, really. Haven? It suits you. Thank you, I said, not moving from behind the counter. A fortress wall between us. He took a tentative step forward. I heard about the second location. Congratulations. I appreciate that. An awkward silence descended. He shifted his weight, looked around the shop, anywhere but at me. I got a new job. It's not what I had, but it's okay. Pays the bills. I'm glad to hear it, I said. And I found, to my surprise, that I meant it. I didn't wish him ill. I just felt nothing, Elena. He finally met my eyes, and his were full of a raw, desperate sorrow. I am so sorry for everything. For Sarah, for the money, for breaking your heart. I was a fool. A arrogant, selfish fool. I looked at him. This man I had loved more than life itself, and I saw the ghost of the boy I'd met in college. But the ghost had no power over me anymore. The love was a fossil, interesting to examine, but long since turned to stone. I know you are, Mark, I said softly, and I forgive you. His eyes widened in shock. He hadn't been expecting that. He'd been preparing for anger, for bitterness, for the cold fury he'd seen at the kitchen table. He wasn't prepared for absolution. You do? I do, I said. Not for you, for me. Holding on to the anger, the hate. It was poisoning me. Forgiving you lets me let it go. It lets me move on. Tears welled in his eyes. I miss you, Elena. God, I miss you every day. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I came out from behind the counter then, not to go to him, but to walk to the door, to hold it open. The gesture was clear. The conversation was over. We both made mistakes, Mark. I trusted blindly. I built my world around someone else. I won't make that mistake again. I looked at him, my gaze steady, clear. I hope you find happiness. I really do. But your happiness is no longer my concern. My life is here now, and it's a good life. He stared at me, and I saw the final, dawning understanding in his face. He had truly lost me, not to another man, but to myself. I was no longer his to lose. He nodded, a slow, defeated movement, and walked out into the rain. I closed the door, locking it, and turned the open sign to closed. I walked back through the quiet, beautiful space of my shop, my kingdom. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt a deep, resonant peace. He had come seeking the ghost of his wife, and he had found a queen in her stead. The exchange was more than fair. The moral of the story isn't that revenge is sweet. It's that revenge is a catalyst. It's the fire that burns away the deadwood, the weakness, the dependency. It forges you in its heat. And if you're strong enough, you emerge not just intact, but transformed. The greatest revenge isn't in the downfall of your enemies. It's in the glorious, unassailable monument you build from the rubble they left behind. They wanted to leave me with nothing, but in their cruelty, they forced me to discover that I had everything I needed inside me all along. I had my own 2 hands to build with. I had my own mind to strategize with. I had my own heart, scarred but still beating, to feel with. My haven was never a place. It was a state of being. It was the unshakable knowledge that no matter what storms raged outside, the core of me was solid, was strong, was mine. I looked around at the beautiful things I had curated, at the business I had built, at the life I had claimed as my own. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of potential. It was my silence, and in it, I was finally completely home.